What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel. Back with another album review for you guys, and this one, out of all the ones that was coming out this weekend on the week of July 15th, this was the big one that I was curious the most about, and it is the second full-length album from Inhuman Condition, Fearsick. So yeah, a little brief history lesson about Inhuman Condition. So, this band formed just 2 years ago in 2020. It was formed by former Massacre members, Taylor Nordberg, who is also currently in Deicide, The Absence, I believe he's also in Rib Spreader, and a couple of other bands. He's on guitars. We got Jeremy Kling, who is the drummer and vocalist, also from The Absence, and also forgot he and Taylor are both in Gorgong, so little kinship there. And then finally, Terry Butler on bass, and we all should know about Terry Butler. In case you don't, Death, currently in Obituary, formerly in Massacre, 6 Feet Under, the list goes on and on. So yeah, basically, they were all former members of Massacre. Taylor and Jeremy were in a more recent version of the band, like a few years ago, before splitting up, and then they decided to form their own band called Inhuman Condition, named after the legendary 1992 EP, Inhuman Condition by Massacre. So, and even like the logo is very much like a nod to Massacre. I almost said knock, but could be a knock because there are some people that just don't like Cam Lee. So there you go. So, I didn't check out their debut album, Rat God, when it came out last year. I checked it out later, and I thought it was a really good album. So I was expecting to hear something similar here with Fearsick. Did we get something similar? Well, we're about to find out as we kick things off with The Mold Treatment, which has this sweet riff that starts off that definitely gives you that old school death metal feel, and that's the other thing with Inhuman Condition. They're basically all about playing that old school Tampa death metal sound. And you definitely get that right away with this riff, but also, actually I'll save that for when we get down the road on the album later. After a couple of verses, we get down into some thrashy fury before a cool groovy breakdown just comes and hits you right in the stomach. Towards the end, you get like a quick doom break before another cool breakdown comes along with a chaotic lead that mixes in taps and squealy dive bombs. Then we get to Recycled Hate, which has thrashy energy right away with that classic Massacre flair to it, like something from beyond, essentially. And that thrashy fury continues throughout much of the verses, but does mix in some almost like classic metal riffing, but just done in a more brutal genre. The chorus even continues in that vein, then we get another sweet breakdown for a moment in the bridge, before you get another squealy dive bomb lead. Caustic Vomit Reveries, even more wild thrash to begin this track, and it got even faster than the thrash you heard on the previous two tracks, as you even get some tremolo riffs popping in with high octane impact. The verses definitely get more groovy, and after the first verse, you get another lead as it transitions into a thrashy chorus, and after the second verse, we get into this like Obituary-inspired D-beat section with another lead, and this lead has much more to offer than the other leads so far up to this point in the album, as there's a little bit more feel attached. Then we get to I'm Now the Monster, and this, well, Caustic Vomit Reveries is where I thought the album kicked into next gear. Then we get into I'm Now the Monster, where that gear stayed pretty much very consistent. Killer groove riff right out of the gate with some sweet double bass that once again feels like Obituary to me. And as things speed up a little bit and the riff changes into the verse, the riff you get almost feels like what would happen if a death metal band tried to write a Metallica riff. The pre-chorus brings back that Obituary groove before a classic metal-inspired quickfire lead shows up, and then before the chorus you get another lead that has a little bit more somber melody attached. Then the chorus itself with the riffs and the beats definitely feels like early Death to me. Then a couple of more leads will kind of show up here and there towards the end, including one from, ironically, former Death and Massacre guitarist Rick Rozz. And that's not the first time you hear Rick Rozz on this album, as he pops in again on the following track, King Khan. Dark, eerie acoustic intro to give you a sense of dread for what's about to come. Then they play that line on the electric, and it gives it a little bit more of an evil, sinister vibe. Afterwards, you get an evil thrash riff, once again bringing back that classic Massacre feel. The verses carry that thrash onslaught forward, while the pre-choruses get groovy, and then the thrash returns throughout the choruses. And after the second chorus, you get a second Rick Rozz lead, although this one, pretty much mostly squealy dive bombs. But then we get maybe the best breakdown of the album up to this point, where there are some atonal lines on the guitar coming along before we end off with another squealy lead. Then we get Hellucide, which, that sounds like a good name for a band. I might take that if it's not used already. Hellucide. That's a cool name. But this track starts off with another sweet groove riff, and then that riff goes throughout the first verse. The pre-chorus speeds up just a little bit before you get back to that full-speed thrash in the chorus. Then towards the end, another evil riff with some spoken word coming in before a brutal breakdown comes in, followed by a lead section that started off squealy, but then you get more melodic flair towards the end of this lead. Wound Collector, right away into a groove with the riff and the beats, and this groove more or less reminded me actually of Blood Red Throne a little bit. Then suddenly, it gets kind of doomy, like doom-laden, back to that obituary feel again. Then the choruses kind of bring back a little bit of those like D-beat chugs with a riff that once again brings back that early death feel again. After the second chorus, you get that high-speed thrash back, but there's a little bit more grit attached. Then the beats change while the guitars are just going chaotic, as it seems throughout the whole album. But then we get to maybe my favorite song of the album, which was Fence Walker, the second to last track. Perhaps the best groove riff of the album starts us off here before it gets thrashy with some gross sounding tremolos. The verses and choruses keep that thrash going, but with subtle tweaks here and there. But the moment, probably for me, the best moment of the album, right after the first chorus, you get this awesome build-up with cool drum fills and, like, atmospheric drums with haunting ambience, like the most Massacre-sounding thing. Like, it kind of reminded me of the beginning of Dawn of Eternity off the beginning of From Beyond. Things then even slow down even more to Doom territory, and the bass comes through with a great bass line, and then hands down, the best lead of the album comes in towards the end with some atmosphere and melody laced all the way around it. It was beautifully executed. Then we get to the final track, which is Where Pain is Infinity. An eerie riff starts us off with a little bit of influence from the band Cancer, and then it gets into a doom groove before the tempo speeds up to more of those DB chugs throughout the verses. The choruses, on the other hand, like the first chorus, has a little bit more double bass and a little bit more of like that thrashy vibe with some classic metal riffing, but then chorus number 2, it turns into a more brutal breakdown that kind of almost feels like suffocation a little bit. Not quite a slam breakdown per se, but a brutal breakdown. Then in the bridge, you get a doom break that kind of brings in a little bit of Asphyx influence from what I heard. And then you get a wild tapping lead followed by some killer shred to bring this song and album to close. Now, technically, there was the cover of Metallica Whiplash, but that wasn't on the version that I listened to, so I can't comment. So, overall, it was short, sweet, to the point. It was a little bit over 30 minutes, like 32 minutes, roughly. Now, the production on this album, I liked, although there were times where I thought the bass was kind of buried, except for that one line in Fence Walker. That was really where the bass was at its most prominent sounding presence. Whereas throughout much of the album, it's like the bass was kind of buried behind the guitars, and the drums. But it definitely kind of has that like old school More Sound vibe to it. It's almost like as if this was a More Sound recording done in 2022. If that makes sense. Now, the things that kind of drove me nuts about this album was a couple of the songs, especially in the very beginning, like, especially in the Mold Treatment and Recycled Hate. No pun intended, but they kind of were recycling a lot of ideas in those tracks and just kind of felt a little bit formulaic really quick for me. And then also, the real big thing that I kind of struggled with on this album, pretty much like 95% of the lead work on this album was just nothing but squealy dive bombs. And I get that was the thing with Slayer, but Slayer was able to do it and do it right. Whereas here, it's almost like a lot of the leads could have been worked on and could have had more melody and more shred and flair to it. And I know that I can tell Taylor definitely has it in him to really unleash some wild shred. I mean, you heard it on, especially towards the end of the album on Fence Walker and Where Pain is Infinity. Those were the best leads of the album for me because they weren't just nothing but wheelie wah, wheelie wah the whole time. So that was really the big thing that kind of drove me nuts about this album, was the squealy lead work 95% of the time. So I really feel like if a couple of those songs, especially near the beginning of the album, could have had some different ideas and the lead work could have been changed to where you could have gotten more melody and more atmosphere attached, I think this album would have been rated higher, in my opinion. Like, this could have been one of the best albums of the year if some of those things could have been worked on. But overall, it's not a bad album. It's actually a good album. There were a lot of killer riffs on this album. Great vocal performance, great drum work. It's just, yeah, the bass could have been upped a little bit in the mix. A couple of the tracks could have had some new ideas thrown in, changed things up. But most especially, the leads could have been so much better done, or so much more well done in terms of execution. That's what I was trying to get at. For those reasons, I'm going to give this album an 8 out of 10. It's a good album. I definitely recommend you check it out. I definitely feel like Rat God was a lot better than this one, and Rat God was killer as fuck. Here, it kind of felt like retread a little bit in terms of like, well, no, not retread. What's the word that I'm looking for? Oh, formulaic. Like, there was some formulaic moments on here, like I said, especially in the beginning of the album. But aside from that, like, yeah, the lead work could have been better. The bass could have been upped in the mix. But other than that, like, everything else about this album was really, really good. So it's not me hating on it. It's a good album. 8 out of 10, that's a positive score. It's just I feel like if those complaints that I had could have been fixed, this could have been a high contender for Album of the Year, like, no doubt. But what did you guys think of Fear Sick by Inhuman Condition? Let me know in the comments section below, and until next time, horns high. See you guys soon.
I'm very mad right now. You're kidding me. You are kidding me.
Nah.
He was kidding me! Bruh!
No, I'm not.
No!
I win.
Are you kidding me? No!
I had 4.
I was 1 card away!
That was
1 card!
clutch.
No, dude! Unbelievable. I had 3 7s and a wild card, as well as 3 8s, 2 9s. I was there, dude. No!
So, yeah, it is what it is. But anyways, I whooped his ass.
Boo! Trash game!